Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Beyond World is One. I'm Shivan John. Now, this is Speed News. Let's get started. India's Ministry of External Affairs declared an official of the Pakistani High Commission persona non grata, expelling him from the country for indulging in espionage. The Ministry of External Affairs said the official was involved in activities not in keeping with his official status in India. He has been asked to leave India within 24 hours. A démarche in this regard was issued to the Pakistan High Commission. The expulsion of the Pakistani diplomat came hours after a top Indian military officer on Tuesday briefed foreign defense attaches from around 70 countries on the successful conduct of Operation Sindoor. Justice B.R. Gavai took oath as Chief Justice of India, becoming the first Buddhist to lead the nation's judicial system. President Draupadi Murmu administered the oath of office to Justice Gavai, who has assumed the role following the retirement of CJI Sanjeev Khanna. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Home Minister Amit Shah, ex-CJIs and judges of Supreme Court and High Courts attended the ceremony. Breaking their silence, Imran Khan's sons Suleiman and Qasim have made appeals to the international community, including US President Donald Trump, to help secure their father's release from jail. They cited inhumane conditions and lack of basic human rights in jail. The former Pakistani Prime Minister has been imprisoned since August of 2023 on corruption charges and faces pending trials under the Anti-Terrorism Act related to the 9th of May 2023 protests. Israel's army said it intercepted a missile fired from Yemen, where Iran-backed Houthi rebels have kept up attacks on Israel since soon after the Gaza war began in 2023. And this was the second time in less than 24 hours that Israeli air defenses had intercepted a missile fired from Yemen. In a statement, Israeli army said that the missile was intercepted following the sirens that were sounded a short while ago in several areas in Israel. Israeli President Isaac Herzog presented the Presidential Medal of Honor to German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier at the President's residence in Jerusalem. The award recognizes Steinmeier's decades-long moral leadership, his unwavering friendship with the State of Israel, and his commitment to democratic values, memory, and humanity. A statement from the President's office said this. The ceremony took place during Steinmeier's visit to Israel following Herzog's state visit to Germany. The reciprocal visits marked 60 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced plans to impose new sanctions on Russia if Moscow fails to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine. Macron mentioned that financial services and oil and gas could be targeted in these sanctions. This stance was supported by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who also called for a significant tightening of sanctions on Russia if President Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire. The proposed sanctions are part of a broader effort by European nations to pressure Russia into accepting a 30-day ceasefire. Venezuela has inaugurated Victory Square in Caracas to commemorate Russia's victory over Nazi Germany in 1945. The event featured a drone show and dance performances showcasing the country's solidarity with Russia. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez emphasized the importance of the anti-fascist movement, stating that the tribute to Russia's victory is not only for Russia but also for those fighting against fascism to shape humanity's future. US President Donald Trump announced that Washington has the framework for a significant trade deal with China, which would open up China's economy to US businesses. According to Trump, the agreement would be very strong and beneficial for both countries. In a media interview aboard Air Force One, Trump said that he could see himself dealing directly with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the final details of a US-China trade deal. Bolivian President Luis Arce has announced that he will not seek re-election in the upcoming presidential elections in August. He said he did not want to contribute to dividing the vote in the election and helping a right-wing candidate win, despite being nominated as the candidate for the ruling moving towards Socialism Party. Arce stated his decision to withdraw his candidacy, addressing the Bolivian people directly. Peruvian Prime Minister Gustavo Adrianzan resigned on Tuesday, one day before Congress was set to debate a motion of no confidence against him. He cited the nation's higher interests as the reason for his irrevocable resignation, which was presented in a televised address alongside President Dina Boluarte and his cabinet. His resignation comes amid rising concerns over crime rates in Peru, particularly following the kidnapping and killing of 13 minors by illegal operators earlier this month. And this move poses a significant challenge for President Boluarte, whose approval ratings have plummeted to historic lows. Fishermen in Chile are protesting against delays in a fishing bill that aims to redistribute quotas between artisanal and industrial fishermen. The bill, which has been pending in the Senate, seeks to increase the share of quotas for artisanal fishermen who feel that the current law enacted in 2013 heavily favors the industrial sector. The protests, which have included marches to the National Congress in Valparaiso, are driven by concerns that the bill may be altered or stalled in the Senate due to opposition from industrial fishing companies. These companies claim that the proposed changes are unconstitutional and threaten to take legal action if the bill is approved. Around 50 Waorani indigenous people armed with traditional spears and adorned in feather headdresses gathered in Quito to protest the Ecuadorian government's plan to expand oil exploitation in the Amazon. The community is fighting against new projects that would allow oil companies to extract up to 300,000 barrels of crude oil per day from the Amazonian provinces of Pastaza and Morona, Santiago. In 2019, a court ruling protected 180,000 hectares of Waorani territory from oil companies, recognizing indigenous jurisdiction over the land. However, the state retains authority over the subsoil. The Waorani community members say they are determined to defend their land and way of life against the government's plans, which they believe will cause irreparable harm to their environment and culture. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un supervised a firing drill and tactical training by military special forces on Tuesday. Still photographs released by the KCNA state news agency showed Kim observing the drills and meeting with military officials and soldiers. The state media reported that Kim emphasized the importance of completing war preparations, stating it's the most vital task. And this comes after Kim Jong-un's visit to the Russian embassy in Pyongyang, where he warned of potential military action if the United States persists in what he described as military provocations against Russia. Relatives and friends bade farewell to the Mexican mayoral candidate who was killed during a shooting at a campaign event. The vigil and funeral were held in the eastern state of Veracruz, where ruling party candidate Gutierrez was killed on Sunday. Relatives and attendees demanded justice. Criminals on motorcycles opened fire at the candidate who was talking to supporters after a campaign event. 3 more people were killed and 3 others were injured in the attack. The Veracruz prosecutor's office reported this. Mexico has struggled with electoral violence, particularly during the 2024 presidential election, which saw at least 39 candidates assassinated, according to Integralia, a security consultancy. Jose Mujica, a former leftist rebel who became Uruguay's president from 2010 to 2015, has died at the age of 89, known to many Uruguayans simply by his nickname Pepe. Mujica won fame as the world's poorest president for giving away much of his salary to charity and adopting a humble lifestyle during his presidency. During his term in office, he refused to move to the presidential palace, choosing to stay in his modest home in a suburb in capital Montevideo. It was common to see him driving around in an old Volkswagen Beetle, eating at downtown restaurants where office workers had lunch, and shunning a formal suit and tie.
Hold on a second. Taking a video.
In the United States, severe flash flooding hit a western port in Maryland, forcing the evacuation of an elementary school. Approximately 150 students and 50 adults were rescued by boat after water began breaching the second floor of the school. Several homes and businesses were inundated with floodwaters after hours of heavy rain which caused significant damage. Roads throughout the area were closed due to flooding, including major arteries. After a 5.9 magnitude earthquake struck near the Greek island of Kessos, Greece Ministry for Climate Crisis and Civil Protection issued a tsunami warning. It advised people to move away from the coast and urged them to follow local authorities' instructions. Tremors from the quake were felt as far away as Israel and southwestern Turkey. People in Egypt also felt the quake, with the country's National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics reporting a magnitude of 6.4 but no casualties or property damage. India has taken a significant leap in semiconductor innovation with the launch of its first 3-nanometer chip design centers in Noida and Bengaluru. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw inaugurated the state-of-the-art design facilities of Renesas Electronics India Private Limited, marking a new frontier in India's semiconductor journey. Highlighting the uniqueness of the new facility, Vaishnaw informed that this is India's first design center to work on cutting-edge 3-nanometer chip design, a milestone that places India firmly in the global league of semiconductor innovation. The US dollar stabilized following its biggest decline in more than 3 weeks overnight, with softer than expected US consumer inflation data bolstering the case for Federal Reserve easing just as global trade tensions cool. The US dollar index, which measures the currency against 6 major peers, was flat at 100.94. The index has jumped 1% on Monday and touched a 1-month peak on optimism that a de-escalation in China-US trade tensions would avert a potential global recession. The dollar is still some 3% below its level on April 2nd, when Trump announced his Liberation Day tariffs. Oil prices retreated as traders eyed a potential jump in US crude inventories, though prices held near the two-week highs and amid optimism after the United States and China agreed to temporarily lower their reciprocal tariffs. Brent crude futures fell 39 cents or 0.6% to $66.24 a barrel by 4 a.m. GMT. US oil futures trade around $63. Both benchmarks had climbed more than 2.5% in the previous session. Experts say the United States could take advantage of lower prices to buy more West Asian crude for its strategic petroleum reserve. US consumer prices rebounded moderately in April as declining food costs partially offset rising rents, leading to the smallest annual increase in 4 years. But the inflation outlook remains unclear against the backdrop of tariffs. The rise in prices reported by the Labour Department was below economists' expectations and showed little impact from President Donald Trump's sweeping import duties, whose impact economists expected to become evident by the middle of this year. The data suggested price pressures were cooling before Trump's chaotic tariffs policy and did not change economists' views that the Federal Reserve would continue to pause its interest rate cutting cycle until late in the summer. Australian wages picked up in the March quarter, led by government pay rises, while subdued growth in the private sector suggested a tight labour market, which was still no bar to a cut in interest rates. Investors remain confident the Reserve Bank of Australia will cut by a quarter point to 3.85% at its May 20th meeting. That's mostly due to cooling inflation at home and global uncertainty caused by US tariff policies. Annual wage growth accelerated to 3.4% from a two-year low of 3.2%, led by a rebound in the public sector. In contrast, growth in the private sector stayed at 3.3%, well down from its 2024 peak of 4.2%.